What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 4 of the PJF podcast. Look, we got a very special guest today. We got Dr. Andy Galpin in the lab. If you haven't heard of Dr. Andy Galpin, you might be under a rock. He's been on all the big podcasts. You've probably seen him on Joe Rogan. He is a lead researcher and a great coach, an actual strength coach. When it comes to fiber typing, he is the guy. And so this podcast is all about how to train for optimizing our fiber type. So how do we get more fast twitch muscle fibers? We go pretty deep into the science, but we also give some very good, simple, practical takeaways. Let's get it. You're listening to the PJF Podcast, a show dedicated to decoding elite sports performance and fitness. I'm Paul Favorites, and I'm an MBA strength and conditioning and performance trainer. If you want to become superhuman, take your fitness, and take your sports performance to the next level, this is the podcast for you. Let's do it. All right, so we got Dr. Galpin in the podcast studio today. So for the few of you guys who don't already know Dr. Galpin, he is a high-level scientist who is also entrenched in the actual coaching realm. So he doesn't just do this in the books. He's actually real-life teaching, UFC and what other type of athletes do you work with?
I got some baseball players right now, major league guys, boxers, wrestlers, a lot of combat sports. That's my passion. But I've done a lot NFL, things like that in the past. I just have gravitated more to combat sports because I like it more personally.
Right.
So the major league baseball players pay the bills, that's for sure.
Yeah.
The combat dudes are my passion.
Got you. Yeah. So, I mean, Dr. Galpin he's very, very well known for his research in fiber typing and many, many other areas. He's a professor at Cal State Fullerton, which is how I actually met him because our gym is in Anaheim and we do a lot of research with Cal State Fullerton. So very, very highly respect. You've probably already seen him on the Joe Rogan podcast or just about any other high-level podcast, which, by the way, if you were on Joe Rogan and now you're on ours, does that make us even with him?
Since I did this one second, I think this is a step up.
Oh, okay. That's how it works.
Yeah, no,
okay.
I'm pretty sure your audience is probably about the same size,
okay.
too. So,
Yeah. No, it's that's good to know.
I'm going to change my entire website now to I was joking with some friends the other day that I'm just going to change all my social media and name my website, everything, to just I was on Rogan. It's just my website's just going to be iwasonrogan.com, and there's just going to be like a pay me now button.
Yeah, it's like genius.
Where's my money?
Like, I don't know what I'm purchasing, but he was on Rogan.
That's all you need.
Here's his money. So I may change it now to on the PJF Performance.
Yeah.
That's it.
For sure.
Pay me button. Go.
I love it.
Is that the name of the show? Wasn't you guys?
It's the PJF podcast.
Okay, close enough.
Yeah, it's not that creative.
It's direct though.
Yeah. So maybe give us like a quick background of kind of how you got into this and kind of what you do.
Yeah, so, like most of us that are sports scientists, we were pseudo-athletes. In other words, I played everything growing up. I played small Division III football, and so I was good enough to where I was incentivized to train better. It made a big difference, right? The difference between me being able to start early in career or never see the field was the quality of my training and nutrition. But I wasn't so good that it didn't matter, right? And so you have that perfect blend of really incentivized to learn and do more. And so played small school football, got a degree in exercise science. Then I went and worked actually in Tempe at Mark Verstegen's place.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay,
it used to be called Athletes Performance.
Performance, yep.
Yep, so I did a bid down there. And then quickly realized like full-time strength conditioning was not going to be my jam. I just didn't want to work with professional athletes on those terms. Mm-hmm. So I went back, got a master's in same kind of thing, exercise science, human movement, whatever, and then got a PhD in what's called human bioenergetics. So it's like muscle physiology, etc. Right. So started doing the combat sports and Olympic sports during that time since I didn't play football anymore, and then came out here to Fullerton, and it was a nice opportunity because the job specifically was for strength and conditioning. And so I got to do science on my terms, which was I'm only doing things that are helping human performance. That's all I cared about. I don't want to do disease and prevention and management stuff like that. And I want to work with athletes, but I want to work with them on my terms. So I get to do both. Like I don't have to do the type of science I don't want to do. I don't have to do the type of stuff with athletes I don't want to do. So I just I can't even believe how lucky I am, and my job is so awesome.
That's awesome.
I just hang out and talk to jerks like you guys all day.
I love it.
It's super fun. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, a lot of times the funny thing is we did this episode last week. We did fiber typing, and every like 5 minutes I was citing one of your articles or papers that you have done. And so at the end of the episode, I'm like, you know what? We're just going to throw this away and let's get him in here.
Yeah, I spent the entire time preparing for that episode just watching all of your psychology or your videos on YouTube. And I'm just like, okay, I know nothing. And so I get in the studio and I'm just like, and I'm trying to regurgitate what you were obviously taking all the time to explain, you know what I mean, in your videos on YouTube. And I'm just like, I'm not doing anybody.
And you're thinking this dude lives like 10 miles up the road. Why not have him?
Yeah, we literally threw out, it was like an hour and a half. We threw it all out. So yeah,
unfortunately, that was also the episode where I talked about Kawhi being the second best. So.
Yeah, okay.
So we're gonna have to redo that part next episode. That's fair. Yeah. So, anyways,
that's a sign that you do good quality content, though. Like when you throw things out a lot, that means you really care about the quality.
Right.
So that's a good sign.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we're sitting here speculating on what we think about fiber types, whereas you're up the street in the lab, like jamming pens into people's legs and actually figuring out what is going on, and so. You are the guy, probably the best guy that we could possibly have to talk about fiber typing. Do you want to give us just like a quick background on maybe what are slow twitch, what are fast twitch, what are the hybrids? Give us a general overview.
Yeah, sure. And we can go as far down this road as you want. Most people are aware of that level, right? There's fast twitch and there's slow twitch. And so what this means is if you think about your quad or your hamstring, glutes, doesn't matter. Pick a muscle, pick your favorite one. You both have excessive amounts of muscle, so whichever one is your favorite.
Yeah, I'm pretty jacked.
Your deltoids are just enormous.
That's why
we'll go with those. Basketball is the sport I think of when I think, where are the guys with the most muscle? Exactly. Let's go basketball. I've never met a sport that's more allergic to strength training than basketball.
Facts. Yeah, that's why we're here.
It's crazy.
That's why we're here.
And that's why we're,
And that's why you guys... Hopefully make $70 million a year because no one has this information that they need in the basketball community.
Exactly.
Anyways, so you pick the quadricep, one of the quadricep muscles. That muscle is actually just a composite of millions of individual muscle cells, right? So the entire collective, how those things function actually determines how the whole muscle functions. It's kind of like thinking about a city. So a city isn't actually anything. A city is just a composite of all the individual people within the city. And so how those people act, what those people behave, their relationships, that actually forms the culture of the city, right? So there is no actual muscle. There's just a whole bunch of individual muscle cells.
Right.
How those things behave determines the muscle function. And so one of the ways that we differentiate between these different people types or cell types is we call them fast twitch or slow twitch, depending on how they actually function. So literally the word twitch is referring to the most distinguishing characteristic between the two, which is that the slow twitch fibers, get ready for this, they twitch or they contract slower.
That's innovative.
The fast ones go faster. And what typically then happens is we can put them on a continuum, which is, it's not that you have, like, if we looked at both of you, we couldn't say, okay, there are taller people and short people. Like, well, hold on, no, just because you're taller than him, that doesn't, no, like there's a range of tall and short, right? And so if we had to bucket it, we could say, okay, everyone over 6'1" is tall, and everyone under 6'1" is short. And so if we wanted a very simplistic view, we would call them fast and slow. But the reality of it is, this is a giant continuum. The people that are 4'1" are shorter than the people that are 7'7". But the reality of it is, most of us live up and down the spectrum, and where you want to draw that line of what's tall versus short, what's fast versus slow, is fairly arbitrary. And so what that means is, a slow twitch fiber are typically smaller, but they have much better endurance. They're better at using fat as a fuel, and they don't fatigue nearly as much. Fast twitch are faster, they contract with more speed, but they typically fatigue sooner, and they're better at using carbohydrate as opposed to fat as a fuel. But we also have to keep in mind, like I said, that's making the very simplistic view fast versus slow. In reality, there's about 7 or 8 different individual types. And one of them on the far right-hand side is the slowest of the slow, and then one on the far left-hand side is the fastest of the fast. And we can certainly talk about those actual different types in the middle, but that's the basic overview of what they do. And so when we return to this idea of function, what this means is how many of each type you have in a given muscle will predict a lot of how you actually perform. So if you are very good, explosive, Russell Westbrook, I've never biopsied him, but I'm going to go ahead and guarantee that dude is massively fast twitch.
Right.
I mean, he's just ridiculous, right? So someone on the other end of the spectrum, and I won't call out any names in the NBA because, like, I'm basically going to say you're not explosive.
Kyle Korver.
There you go.
I'll call him out.
Right. Probably has a lot less fast twitch fibers in his muscle relative to a Russell Westbrook, right? And so that is then there's many things that determine human performance. The muscle's one piece of it.
Right.
The connective tissue, nerve system, lots of other stuff determine that function as well. But it gives us a big insight of what you're likely to do, and then what we can do then training and nutrition wise based on that.
Right. And so we have our type 1 or slow twitch, we have our type 2A, and then we have our type 2X, and then we have all these hybrids in between. Is that correct?
Yeah. So if you go back throughout the history of the fiber typing, it gets ultra confusing because of nomenclature that most of you probably don't really care about. But I'll cut to the chase. You're right. The type 1s are the slow twitch. Type 2A are the very pure fast twitch. Now, we do have the genes, and we have the ability to code for and make another fast twitch called 2X. Okay. Now, this used to be called 2B back in the old school. It's now the correct term is 2X. And for a bunch of reasons, you can watch my 3-hour videos on YouTube that like 13 people have watched. But they're up there, so you can review them.
Yeah.
So my point being, the 2X fibers are actually far faster than the 2A fibers. And so you think of it this way. The 2A fibers are about 5 to 6 times faster than the type 1s. The 2Xs are about 20 times. So it is a significant jump in power production.
And a significant drop in endurance, correct?
Significant drop.
Okay.
Yeah. The problem is, although we have the genetic potential to express that 2X, it's extremely rare to find a 2X fiber in a human. In a healthy.
It's more in animals.
Very, very. In fact, if you look at like a cheetah specifically, those things are going to be like 95% 2X. Really, really high. Rats, murines, a bunch of different animals. Any feline is going to have a ton, and or will be almost exclusively 2X. So we have the genetic potential to express it, but it's super, super, super rare.
Yeah. Why'd you say healthy human?
Well, because we actually find them a lot in people that are maybe extremely obese and old.
Okay.
Or people that have, the biggest case is when you have like a spinal cord degeneration. So if you are paraplegic for 20 years, you'll have almost entirely 2X.
And is that because you don't have endurance demands, and so it shrivels up and...
Very, very intuitive. We don't know, but this is what we would guess, right? There's just no demands for anything. And so the theory is maybe you default back to 2X as a survival strategy and a metabolic strategy to save energy. Now, where it gets really fun, though, is, and this is where I've carved out sort of a unique position in science, is I come at this from a sport perspective. I don't do the old people aging sort of thing. And I specifically come at this from an anaerobic sport perspective. So I played football, Olympic weightlifting, I competed in that, and then combat sports, right? Those are the 3 sports I lived in. And when I looked across the literature, we don't have any evidence on any anaerobic sport people in terms of fiber type. Now, this sounds totally counterintuitive because we've been told for years, oh, explosive athletes have this. Well, no one's actually looked at these athletes. I can tell you right now, there are no studies on high-level basketball players.
Yeah.
None.
I was trying to get Paul to let you stick a pen in his leg before you got here, and he's
don't be
he's not
scared,
there
buddy.
yet. Yeah.
I am scared.
Yeah.
I'm afraid of regular needles.
Oh, my God.
That's
So,
what I said. I'm like, what's
Something the size of a pin going into my leg.
There's
you
4
could
of
be
us.
the
And that's
first one
why-
for the
so-
database.
So I emailed Dr. Galpin a few years ago. I'm like, hey, let's get our NBA guys in and let's do this fiber type testing. And then I found out that it was like a needle the size of a pin. And I'm like, they're not going to do this.
Yeah. I've had no problem with my fighters do it. That's weird.
Yeah, because they're super tough.
No correlations there.
Basketball is the softest sport out there.
Oh, see, I'm trying to change those metrics too.
I've had some of the biggest powerlifters, bodybuilders that you can imagine in there, and some of them are just terrified. I'm like, dude, you'll stick a needle of testosterone in your ass all day, but I can't do this little tiny chunk. And then I got these, like, I would love to tell this story. We did this training study years ago with 80-year-old women, legit 80-year-old women. And, we have to be really careful and cautious with them when we're taking the biopsies because we're jamming a giant needle in them. It's like a little surgery. And she's like, are you doing okay? And you biopsy them, and you're doing okay. And we're checking. And one of the ladies one time just got so irritated, and she's like, I've had 7 kids. It's like, all right, you're probably good with this little needle.
That's fair.
You're fine.
That's funny.
But it's not that big a deal. I've had probably 40 on myself.
Really?
Yeah, loads.
And you kind of bounce right back, like it doesn't actually affect you.
No, not at all. We've done them in the soleus, so like your lower calf right before a marathon, and then had people run a marathon, then done another one when they finish. I've had 8 in one day in my quad and done like 15 sets of 85% cleans. So you can do them in do whatever. It's like a blood draw.
Yeah.
It just looks super
Interesting.
scary. It's not painful at all, really.
Yeah.
So anyways, to go back to finish my damn thing. Sorry.
Speaking of the soleus, that is a highly slow twitch, correct? And
So
that's another thing that I think people need to understand is all muscles are not built equally. Like our postural muscles are more slow twitch, right?
100%. So form is function, right? If you look across the muscles, if you look at what they're supposed to do, that's probably going to give you a good indication of what they're comprised of. So the postural muscles, anti-gravity muscles would call them. Soleus is a good example. In humans, it's typically about 80-85% slow twitch. Wow. In animals and non-human animals, it's going to be 100% slow twitch. So humans are really special in a bunch of different ways. In fact, humans are also special because our muscle cells are the biggest cells by volume in basically all of biology. So our muscles are enormous. Even though the total size isn't large, the muscle cells are huge, which has a really unique feature in the fact that it gives us the most adaptability and plasticity. Yeah. Our ability to change our muscle composition and function is higher than any other animal.
That's interesting.
Which is really, really awesome. And potentially one of the reasons why we've survived a couple million.
Yeah. Interesting.
Right. So if you look at like the hamstrings, though, the hamstrings are going to be way more fast twitch. The glutes are going to be a little bit of a mix. The quads are a little bit of a mix. The lower back, like spinal erector, is going to be almost entirely slow twitch. Traps are different. Biceps are different. So the form is the function. The biggest one that we have being fast twitch is, again, probably the hamstrings muscle or the hamstring muscles, the hamstring muscle, depending on which one you want. Problem is, we really can't biopsy any of those muscles. It's really, really tough. I'm not super convinced. Like, you guys, hamstring pulls are common, right? When's the last time you saw somebody tear a glute?
Very rare.
Yeah. So there's some muscles I'm willing to fuck with a little bit.
True.
Not touching a hamstring.
Right.
Not on an athlete.
That makes sense.
Not doing that. So
that makes sense.
So you've never done that? You've never done a hamstring?
No, I never would. I've done patella tendon, biopsy the patella tendon. I'll never do that again. I couldn't squat for probably 2 years on it, on myself.
Wow.
Oh, you did it yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
So don't do that.
That's tough.
Okay.
Let's sell your basketball players on that.
Yeah, right. So
your
going
hamstring
back,
and your patella. Come on.
going back to, we were talking about the type 2X. Are you convinced that, these elite athletes, these Zion Williamsons, do they possibly have it and they just haven't been tested?
Can you get him in my lab?
I don't know. Probably not.
What would you be able to learn from doing a biopsy?
Oh my gosh. How well are you connected? You got to know. I know you know some of
I know
Zion.
people who know people.
Yeah.
So, But I don't know if he likes big needles.
Yeah.
I know this. He's winking over here. You didn't see that part on camera. He's winking at me, though. It's going to happen. Yeah. No, I think you're dead on, man. This is the problem. Because of what I was talking about, we have just done such poor job of studying the muscle of these anaerobic explosive, and specifically the one genre of athletes, regardless of sport, that we have not studied at all are fast athletes. From a muscle perspective, like a cellular muscle perspective, nothing on fast athletes. We understand a lot of strength, but we know nothing about speed from the cellular perspective. And the thing that makes me extremely confident in that is about 12, 15 years ago probably now, I was a part of a project where we actually biopsied a world record holding sprinter. So he still holds a couple of world records in the 60-meter hurdles, I think, and the 110 or whatever that is. And he was the only person I've ever seen in my life with more than 1% of those 2X fibers. And he actually had about 24%.
Wow. Which
is out of control, right? The only person I've ever seen with more than like 1 or 2% were older people, 60s, 70s, and super inactive. I've biopsied, I don't even know how many athletes myself, and I've probably isolated 100,000 individual muscle cells myself, and I've seen a few dozen of these fibers, and this dude was 24%.
That's crazy.
So something tells me that there is something different about fast athletes.
Yeah.
And if you go back to the word fast twitch, like the name of the cell indicates the contraction speed more than it is the strength.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think fiber type probably predicts and plays a bigger role in speed than any other factor, and we just haven't studied people like Zion.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Like, maybe he is explosive through force production, or maybe he's explosive through speed. Both of those things go into power, right? Power is force times velocity. You can get there in either way, and he's obviously super powerful, right? I was watching one of your clips, and I think you were saying you have him as like number one.
Yeah, he's
athlete.
number one.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's it, right?
Yep.
So I don't know. Like he might just be full of 2A, and he's getting his power production from his neurological system or his connective tissue or his technique. His jumping technique's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Just his mechanics are sensational for his age. Or maybe he's full of 2X's. I don't know.
That's super interesting. Wow.
It's only one way to find out.
Yeah, we got to get him in here.
Hook it up, bro. Get Westbrook too while you're at it.
Yeah.
Because I want to see him.
He's
I'll
local.
try.
Ish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we have these hybrids, which if this might be bro science, but I believe I read from one of your articles that
Then it's definitely not bro science.
when we become trained, we become decisive. We stop having these hybrids and we go to more pure types.
Yeah, that's exactly right, as best as we can tell. Now, this is an area that is really confusing in one aspect. So the hybrids are just like your car. So if you had a hybrid car, it would be, say, powered on both gas and electricity, right? And so we would call it a hybrid car. And so these muscle cells are, again, individual muscle cells that are part slow twitch or part fast twitch, or part fast twitch, part ultra fast twitch, right? So these 2A, 2X hybrids. What's pretty clear is that the 2A, 2X hybrids are no bueno. If you have those in reasonable concentrations, it probably tells me you're unfit. I just haven't seen many people who are fit that have any of them. If you train, they go away. It doesn't even matter how you train or what you do. If you start walking more or lifting or doing intervals, swimming, basically any of that will make those 2A, 2X hybrids go away. The 1-2A hybrids, though, so the fast-slow hybrids, that's less clear. And I've actually changed my position on that in the most recent years, especially after we've done all the biopsies from the Olympians. Some of them had a lot. So I don't know. And I can make an argument that, I mean, just logically, it would behoove you to have some of those hybrids, depending on what sport you're in, right? Like basketball, for example. Boy, having a little bit of fatigue resistance and having, that would actually maybe make a ton of sense. So I don't know. Maybe basketball players have a big amount of these 1-2A, 2 hybrids. I really don't know.
So I actually argue that all the time in terms of basketball players is that I think they have to be the most well-rounded, fit athlete in comparison
Along
to
with
all
fighters.
sports.
I would
Fighters.
significantly disagree.
They need power and they need endurance.
And again, forgive me for 4 major sports.
Yeah, okay.
Or 4 major sports in that argument.
Well,
the more
certainly baseball's
not
not going to make an argument.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But even soccer is definitely something I feel like would be comparable. So would that be something you determine?
Soccer players have been studied a small amount, and by small amount I mean we're talking like 16 total people. So just really,
basketball.
I mean, but really small amounts, and they typically are very fit as well. There's differences. So like in basketball, you're not going to see much top end velocity. Mm-hmm. The guys are too big and the court's too small.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Soccer you will, because you can get a 40-meter all-out sprint, where really basketball is an acceleration game.
Mm-hmm.
Like straight up. It's an acceleration and change of direction game.
Yeah.
Very little max velocity. So the demands are quite different. And then if you even look at like the work to rest intervals of a basketball game. So if you look at that and compare that to soccer, where there's basically no stoppages for the halves. There's no substitution. There's no anything. So it changes the demands quite a bit. So I think you would probably see a little bit of a difference where it would behoove the soccer players to be a little higher in the aerobic fitness capacity, where the basketball players probably have to be a touch higher in the anaerobic repeated ability. So it's not just, how hard can you go for 10 seconds, but how often can you get close to that 90% for as long as possible, which is slightly different. And that's a more similar demand for the fighters that I deal with, especially when they're doing the World Championship fight in July. It's 12 3-minute rounds.
Right. That's crazy. That's crazy.
With some dude punch. I don't know if you guys have ever been punched by a professional, but that alone is just like, you have no idea how fatiguing it is to just get punched.
Yeah.
It's insane. So there's a pretty huge demand on that. So that's a little bit different.
Yeah. So my question would be, I don't know if maybe it's hybrids, or maybe there's guys like Russell Westbrook who are extremely fast twitch, but they have other superpowers such as their long Achilles tendon, and so you're getting free energy. Every time you take a step, you're not utilizing, you don't need ATP for energy coming from tendons. And so sometimes guys like Russell Westbrook, super high calves, long Achilles, he might be super fast twitch, but his endurance is still incredible.
Yeah.
Whereas Zion Williamson, I don't know if you really watch Duke games, but he got taken out pretty early. Like he would go hard, he would burn out 5 minutes, 7 minutes in the game, they got to take him out. Whereas like Trey Jones is playing full court D all game, he didn't sit once.
Yeah.
So
I'm totally switching topics. I'm gonna come back and answer that, but you just made me think of something, because I'm from Seattle, and I'm a diehard Seahawks and Sonics fan. And all I can think of when I watch Zion is Sean Kemp.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that legit or no?
Yes. It's legit, but he's Sean Kemp on steroids.
Yeah. Well, right.
And more coordinated around the rim and better agility. He cuts better than Sean Kemp.
You're hurting me a little bit right now saying this, but I'll take it. You're the expert. I'll
Sean
take it.
Kemp was very close vertically, but Zion produces that force way better horizontally, laterally, all that.
Mechanics is Zion better.
Mechanics. Yeah, especially off one. Sean Kemp was incredible off two.
Yeah.
He could go off one, but he was incredible off two. Zion is incredible off one and off two.
All right. Anyways.
Which at that body weight is insane. Mostly big guys don't do well off 1 foot.
Yeah.
Especially guys with super wide hips. It's normally the narrow hip bones that do really well off 1 foot. But he has wide hips and he does great off 1 foot. Makes no sense.
Okay. So anyways, the reason why I said that, there was an actual reason based on your question, kind of. More because I was interested. I was thinking about Sean Kemp mostly. But no, so this is one of the things why we call our field kinesiology or exercise science, is because there's many aspects to human performance. My area is niched down to muscle at the cellular level, but we can achieve performance in a lot of different ways physically. So going through that stuff with Zion, like or the Russell Westbrook example you brought it up, maybe he is or isn't different at the muscle cell level, but if he's not, then maybe he's getting that level of performance through mechanics, right? Through leverage, through biomechanics, through pennation angle, so the orientation of the muscle fiber into the bone. It could be a connective tissue issue, so that all of the tissue around each individual cell. So people, let me back up. People forget how force production actually happens. Muscles don't move bones. That's not how it works. A muscle contracts. There is connective tissue around each individual muscle cell. The muscle cell contracting pulls on that connective tissue. All that connective tissue comes together and forms a tendon. That tendon inserts on the bone. So really, how well you transfer force from the muscle cell to that small connective tissue, to the larger connective tissue, to the tendon to pull on the bone, that's what makes you move.
Right.
And that's all got to get coordinated by the neuromuscular system. I'm a muscle guy, so I always give credit to muscle, not the nerves. Not the connective tissue either, but this is legit, right? And this is why I can test people in my lab that have the exact same muscle fiber type, but one of them can snatch 25% more.
Right.
Why? Oh, well, maybe it's because they have better technique. Sure, of course. But maybe it's also just simply, even if they're the same height, same leverage, same ankle length, anthropometrics are identical, maybe because they simply transfer better force better than the connective tissue, or it is a neurological system. We don't know. And this is one of the beauties of my job, and one of the beauties of sports is we can watch people succeed in different ways. So the way that Russell gets the hoop is different than the way that Steph gets the hoop, because they know their physical attributes are different. And so they have to rely on, well, I'm just going to be Steph Curry and I'm never going to come out of the game, right? Because I'm never going to be tired, right? I'm not the fastest guy. But the point is, they can get there in different ways, and they figure that out. And we see that on the court, and that's very easy to pick up. Well, we can just look inside and realize the same thing's happening there. Even in a sport like weightlifting or powerlifting, where they're both doing the exact same activity, like picking up a barbell, there's still different ways I can get there physiologically, and I can hedge towards my success, and I can train slightly differently based on how, which physiological system I'm using and which one's being fatigued and which one's not. So that gives us, that allows us to be individualized with our training prescription and get better results based on how we get the actual physical tasks accomplished. And that's my job, is to figure that stuff out for these guys.
Yep. And first of all, we got to get rid of the myth, because I think a lot of people watching this still are holding on to the myth that we can't change. We're just pure genetic. I'm fast twitch or slow twitch.
No. In fact, I mean, I think we slammed the door on that. I thought we did 15 years ago, but we really slammed it home a couple of years ago, and we looked at monozygous twins. So these are means two people that have the exact same DNA.
Yeah.
So the DNA part's controlled for. So if it is 100% determined by our DNA, then it doesn't matter what you do training-wise, these people should have the exact same fiber type.
Yep.
And so we had monozygous twins that had actually about 30 years of different training backgrounds. So they're in their mid-50s, and they departed ways physically with what they do for exercise when they're about 20. And one of them, who was really fairly inactive and didn't do a lot, it was about 50% fast twitch and 50% slow twitch, which is a normal distribution for the quad, right? That we would talk about, the vastus lateralis specifically. The other twin had nonstop done marathons, half marathons, Ironmans, things like this, right? And he was about 95% slow twitch. So not only can you change, but the amount you can change is basically unlimited. It only comes down to exposure.
Yeah.
With an athlete, we have a limited exposure because fatigue sets in, injury, overuse, right? So we can only dose you so much, but given enough exposure, which is intensity and time, you basically have unlimited plasticity. But just like strength training or your skills, it's an asymptote, right? So when you're terrible, you get really good really quick, right? But the better you get, the slower your increase. The same thing with fiber type. So if you take somebody who hasn't exercised in 20 years and they start exercising, I could biopsy them in the lab. I guarantee you I could start to see a change in their fiber type within 4 to 6 weeks. But if you take somebody who's highly trained and those fibers have specified and individualized into the task, the SAID principle, specific adaptation to impose demand. In other words, you gave it a certain demand, it adapted specifically to that. Well, if you've been doing the same thing, like if we brought Harden in, it would take probably weeks or months of training for us to change his fiber type because it's been very, very differentiated over years of basically doing the exact same thing on a global scale, right? So we would have to it would take us some time, or we'd have to make a significant change in the way that he trains.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. What if we went the exact opposite?
Then you would see it fairly quick.
Yeah.
Because it would go there. But for us to keep going like basketball stuff, it would take years for it to probably really move. I mean, I don't know how much heavy lifting he does. My guess is 0.
Not a ton.
Yeah. So he would probably see pretty good improvements in that area with, just 8 weeks or maybe less from a muscle physiology perspective. Now, I don't know if that helps his basketball game.
Right.
But, so...
so
tough to help that guy.
Right. So if we're looking at increasing fast twitch, let's not talk about what we're taking away, because we'll get to that if we want to take away endurance to get that fast twitch. But let's talk about, is it heavy lifting? Is it plyometrics? Is it explosive lifting? And do the studies, are they convincing?
God, I've done thousands of podcasts by now, and I don't think anyone's ever asked that.
Oh, there we go. That's why we're the best.
Perfect.
That's why we're on Rogan's level.
Fantastic. Well, the piece you brought up, I did this show maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I still think in strength and conditioning, the most forgotten or underappreciated piece is the speed aspect.
Yes.
People talk about strength, people talk about hypertrophy and fat loss, but we just don't have the knowledge and the communication or the conversations about the speed. And so when you brought up the plyometrics, I'm like, man, no one's ever asked me about fiber types with plyometric training. It could be those conversations just don't exist. So the large part is there actually have been a couple of studies that have looked at plyometric training specifically. And I think there's probably some differences happening between like the heavy strength training and the plyometrics. And the evidence does suggest that the plyometrics are very good at increasing the fast twitch, the 2A fibers. Now we need more data on that because, like I said, it's only been a couple of trials and we really don't know. Strength training is very well known to get that task done as well. But I honestly would guess it's doing it differently. I would say that if you want to maximize your fast twitch, I would do both.
Yeah.
You need something that is heavy because we just can't simulate that overload in any other fashion. And you need something that is extremely explosive. And this is high rest, low reps, not going for a run, like not playing pickup. Like I mean really specific, low fatigue, maximum power production, maximum speed production stuff. You blend those two things together, and I think you're going to put yourself in a position to get the most amount of fast twitch fibers that are within your genetic limit.
And welcome to PJF Performance.
Is that a part of your program?
Right. Yeah.
Weird.
So now with concurrent training, so what if I'm doing all these things, which you're talking about heavy lifting, I'm doing plyometrics, but my endurance stimulus is still very, very high. Are they just competing?
Yeah, at some level. That conversation takes a bit of context. So what I mean is it's really nuanced. And so we have to be realistic about it. If you're running 100 miles a week, you're not increasing your fast twitch fiber concentration, period, right? Okay, so if we go to the extreme, that becomes easy. If you go for a jog around the gym before your plyometrics workout, that's not blocking your gains, right? Like that's not blocking you there. So the question really becomes, where's the gray area? How much is too much?
Yep.
I don't know. What I would generally say is if you're getting really tired from the endurance training, then that's going to be a problem. If the dosage is too much, that's going to be a problem. It's hard. It's really, really hard to put a number on it because the scale slides based on how fit you are.
Yeah.
If you're not fit, then that interference effect is really high. If you're incredibly fit, it's a lot less.
Yeah. Let me ask this question from a basketball coaching standpoint: is if you're sitting there and you're in the preseason and you want to be able to work on all these traits in a generalist population for your players, how do you get them to a level of conditioning where you feel like they can sustain playing the game at a level of conditioning, but also don't detract, or rather you want to also enhance their athletic components simultaneously?
All right. I can definitely answer this one. This is what I do for my fighters, because they'll show up 8 weeks out and, oh yeah, I have to be able to fight for 25 minutes and I got to be strong and I have to learn all this skill of jiu-jitsu and wrestling and boxing, right? So that just like basketball, there's a huge, huge skill component to it. Oh, and by the way, I have to lose 35 pounds. 6 weeks, let's go.
Yeah.
What do I do? Like, I can't not work them out a lot because they have to be in a caloric deficit, right? They have to be fit. Like the endurance piece is critical. The worst thing that could ever happen in a fighter's mind basically is gassing out.
Yeah.
They would rather get knocked out than gassed out. That's just basketball players don't care. They get tired, they come out. The ultimate sin in combat sports is you lost because you got tired. It's just like it can't happen. Oh, but by the way, how do I get them faster? Boy, can't be outstrength. Like we knew the guy was stronger and we didn't prepare. Oh my God. So it's incredibly difficult. And this is program design now. So this is how do we train for competing interests physiologically, right? So to really left the muscle perspective, it's the whole thing. And so the easy answer to this is several things. Number one, you have to be a 52-week athlete. Period. Like we have to be thinking about this. We have to have a yearly plan. We have to have with my Olympic athletes, it's a quad. We're on a 4-year plan. If you're at a high school or college level, we should have a plan for our incoming freshmen. We need to have a developmental plan. This is what we call long-term athletic development. This is the thing, even in the pros. Like you got a Zion coming in. I hope to God, where's he going to go? To Pelicans, right?
Yeah.
Most likely. I hope they can sit down and go, we got this 19, he'll be 19 probably. What's our 4-year plan with him? What's our 5-year plan developmentally, rise? Because you can't just, he can play basketball at this level now, but we need to train him so that he's not done when he's 26.
Yep.
So we have to have this plan. If you do that, you can get all these competing interests done. So when you have these short notice 6-week 8 things, it really comes down to having realistic expectations and triaging importance. And that's what you have to go after. You cannot do all those things. You end up getting nothing done. You'll get a little bit kind of better at everything, which makes you feel like nothing actually happened. And so you have to, you brought this up a second ago, it's actively deciding what not to do. You have to actively go, you know what, I know I should be doing an 1.5-hour massage, and I should be getting in my recovery stuff, and I need to be doing yoga flow, and I need to go in sauna work, and I can't do it.
Yeah.
This is no way. So you have to go, oh, you know what, I know we need to get in shape, we need to get better at basketball, but right now, this is the priority. And so it 100% comes down to prioritization. What is the primary absolute goal? What's the secondary goal? And what, if anything, we can say this program did this, what will that be? And then that has to be it.
Right.
This is what I go with at the beginning of camp every single time with the athletes and their head coaches. Now, from my perspective, yours is different because you're the actual sport coach, right?
Yeah.
That decision's on you then. It's not on me. Okay, you're the athlete. You and your head coach, you tell me what the goal is. I'll write the program. I'll build you to get to the goal, but you got to decide what the goal is. Yeah. So I would, if we were working together, I'd come to you and say, all right, coach, like what is the thing you have to get better at? And the way that this makes it easy is I do a point system, 1 to 10. It doesn't even matter. So you got 8-week preseason. Great. You got 10 points to spend. How do you want to spend these 10 points?
Yeah.
You tell me, and then I'll build you the program. Okay, we want to go 2 on endurance, 2 on skill, 2 on okay, great. Well, then you're going to get 2 levels of development in all these. Is that what you want? Yeah, okay, well, let's do that. Now we want to go 5 endurance. We want to go 3. Okay, great. And when you make that system, it's really, really clear of exactly what's happening. And when they get to the end, they're like, well, we got a little bit faster. You're like, great. Well, we spent 2 points on speed. Yeah. That's what we got.
I like that point system. Yeah. That's a lot easier for head coaches to understand.
Yeah, definitely. And so that's also like, do you think it would behoove a head coach to spend that additional time to separate in terms of like even, you know what I mean? Because we're talking a generalized setting where you got a whole bunch of players and they're obviously on different ends of a spectrum in terms of where they're initially starting at. Would you test them all individually and then try and group generalizations for an 8-week program and feel like you'd be able to maximize results better, or just use that overall point system with the group that you have?
It comes down to your situation. So if you're
winning,
I meant like
trying to maximize the opportunity.
If you're part of a Division I staff and there's 15 coaches on board and you got 12 athletes to handle, or are you coaching and you're in charge of 45 kids in a high school? These are different answers, right? If you're at this level where you can individualize, absolutely. The more individualization you can do, the better it's going to be. If you're at this big scale and you're like, there's just no way I can scale this across my high school team, no way, right? No way. You come up with the group needs to focus on conditioning. Oh, yeah, but you know what, Paul? Like, you're so unbelievably fit. Don't worry about it. you can maybe get away with a little bit of that, but that gets really difficult to pull off without somebody going like, what the fuck doesn't Paul get to do the conditioning?
Exactly.
Not going to happen, right? So like team dynamics may win over intelligence. Where you get the NBA, it's like, yeah, no problem, James. Like, we're going to go do this. Like, everyone's doing their own thing a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's super, and they're all pros. They don't care. They're all doing their own stuff. So yeah, the more individualized you can make it, the better. Ideally, you would go through that entire 10-point system with each individual player. And this is exactly what we have done in the past is you go through that thing with the coach. Okay, coach says we want 10 points spread out here. What's strength conditioning coach want? What's the athletic director want? What's the GM want? You start looking through these things, you go, okay, everyone's saying the exact same thing. Now what's the player want? Okay, and now you start having to have big boy conversations. Now me to decide, y'all got to pick. GM says he wants this. You want this. You guys figure it out. Let me know what you want.
Yeah.
Like this is. I'm not going to lose my job. Like, here's what it comes down to, right?
Exactly.
And most of the time, the players just gonna, because they're probably want. Well, GMs pays sometimes too, but it comes down to what you're on there. But point is clarity.
Yeah.
It's real super clear with what you're training them for, and I promise you will get this done with me. If that's not the thing you wanted, well, that was your fault because that's what you chose.
I think what's more realistic than individualizing within the team, outside of like NBA, is just figuring out, like Dr. Galpin was saying, you got to look at your year and what times of the year can we say, let's just build fast switch. Like, we're in May, June. Do we really need to be in shape? We don't. Like, our conditioning can be trash right now, or maybe we do. We just maintain it through the court. Like, let's get our skill work. That's all of our endurance. So like right now with our guys, I'm not doing any endurance. And a lot of them, they want to feel that burn. They want to feel tired, but I do a good job of describing, like, look, if we do that, we're pushing you in that slow twitch direction. Anything that gets you tired and really makes your muscles burn, we're pushing in that slow twitch direction. So right now we're going to go heavy. We're going to take a long rest. We're going to go fast. We're going to take a long rest. And then as season gets closer, we're going to kick up that endurance. And now I know that the fast twitch changes that I made maybe they're not going to stay like that. So maybe let me just throw these out. This is more bro science, but let's say you're 50-50 and I train you how I want you to be trained for fast twitch and I get you to 70-30. I know that's an exaggeration.
Yeah, but point made.
Yeah. So I get you to 70-30. Now we're 8 weeks out, 6 weeks out, and we got to get that conditioning back. I know you're not going to stay at 70% because we can't do that much explosive work, and I got to get more endurance. So my hope is that you get to 60-40 if our goal was improving fast twitch. Right?
Exactly. That's the 100% how you would run the program.
Yeah.
And I've had no problems with buy-in when that whole year is in front of them. It's so what's hard is when they don't see the result tomorrow, so they don't think the program is working.
Yeah.
If you can lay the year out and go, no, May to June we do this, and June to July we do that, and it's like, oh, and so when they get in the middle of that, like, we're not burning, coach, that conversation is gone because they're like, oh no, this is not the burn phase.
I think that's in terms of an industry and a professional standpoint, a huge advantage that pro fighters have opposed to, because you see that in the conflicting in terms of trainers that professionals get handed off to all the time. You get back to your team, you got your team trainer, then you get the off season comes, and you go, you know what I mean, you go to a different guy who's setting you up.
Well,
for
to be clear,
expectations.
No fighters have that.
Yeah,
almost none. Like the few of them have people like us around, like. They get this, but the vast majority are doing the same thing where all they do all day is they show up to practice. And they just practice all day. And then one of the days they don't go to practice because they have a fight that day. But like the rest is there is no plan, there's no structure. And this is why we've been so fortunate with the UFC Performance Institute. Like these messages are coming through now. And then some of the athletes that I work with now are really highly paid but young in the UFC. And so we have plans for year 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? Because the championship money starts coming on the championship fights, not now. But the point, either way, the point is when you look at the thing and you can go, oh, okay, like strength and conditioning, for example, and this will actually translate really well to basketball players because many MMA fighters don't like to lift either. Probably more so than basketball players, but for conflicting reasons, they don't love lifting weights. So if they're in an 8-week camp, say 8 weeks prior to a fight, this is not the time when we try to make them stronger. So if they came to me and said, hey, I want to get stronger and I have a fight in 8 weeks, I would probably really significantly question if that's why do you want to get stronger? Why do you think you need to get stronger? What's going on? That's not the time to build those attributes. Just like you said a second ago, we build your weaknesses in the off-season phase. So after this fight, once you're healthy, we come back. Now let's look at you're not fast enough. Okay, let's develop your speed outside of it. But when you get into that last 6 to 8 weeks, you basically just need to fight. The skill demand.
You are at that point.
Yes, the skill demand is incredibly high. You need to get your timing, your tempo, your rhythm. I mean, the shot in basketball would be the same thing, right? You can't be rusty. It doesn't matter. So the 8-week camps should be skill preparation. We get you better at everything else. You get, your submission skills get higher out of camp. Your intelligence gets better, whatever, the muscle size, we want to add muscle frame. That's what we do outside of that. In camp, 6 to 8 weeks, get better at the sport. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would do with your basketball players. Like, no, play basketball.
Yeah.
6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, you talk about it all the time.
Yeah, you want to get better? That's when you should have been in the off season. Yeah. You don't have that time anymore. Yeah. Now you got to get better playing basketball.
Paul touches on it all the time. He's like, to condition for basketball, you got to play basketball. That's it.
Yeah. We're not going to get you ready by doing a bike or a Versa climber. That's cool and it's good general conditioning. It's not going to really translate though. Yeah.
No, I mean, this is the reason why we call that general physical preparation, right? Mm-hmm. So the farther away, when you're 8-9 months out, you can do general stuff. When you're closer, we need to be more specific, right? Yep. So this is how the spectrum works. The farther away from sport, more general, get closer to sport. Now, you can augment some things there, but for the most part, play the sport when you're that close.
Exactly. So now that brings up the ultimate myth in basketball. So what a typical coach would do, and this even still happens at the high levels, is they say, well, we need endurance demands on the court. So in the weight room, we're going to go all super light, and we're going to go high repetition, and we're going to do circuit-style weight training. And to me, I'm like, you're getting more slow twitch on the court because you're doing all this endurance, and then that's what we're doing also in the weight room. You're a fast twitch mess. Like, we don't have anywhere near what we could have on the fast twitch side.
Yeah, huge mistake. In fact, I argue all the time the same thing when we come across the term sport specific. To me, the last job of a strength conditioning coach is to make them look like their sport in the weight room. Mm-hmm. You should be doing the opposite. Why? Because if they wanted to look like their sport, you know what they would go do?
Their sport.
Bingo.
Yeah.
You do not need to look like the sport in the weight room. You need to be giving them the exact opposite.
Right.
What are they not getting on the court? You know what they're not getting on the court? Heavy overload. Mm-hmm. What are they getting on the court? Repeated same demands, right?
Yep.
Fatigue, endurance, muscular endurance. Great. I don't need to mimic that in the weight room. I need to do the exact opposite. Let's do corrective exercise, whatever that means. We'll do functional stuff. Let's do strength. Let's do overload. Let's train the muscle groups that we can't really get well trained over there. Let's do position, movement quality, mechanics. Mechanics, because you're not going to worry about that when you're out running. Mm-hmm. This is what we do in the strength conditioning room. These are short sessions. They're not long, but give them the exact opposite stimulus, and so they become well-rounded. If not, you're losing everything you trained for in the off season for the most part, and you're not improving the thing that will actually translate into their performance in the court, like force production, absorbing force. Like, okay, I don't have to squat 600 pounds to play basketball well. Sure, but you got to absorb a tremendous amount of force when you land from those 40-inch verts every day. That is a leg strength issue. That is can you move in a deadlift hinge position properly with a lot of force demands at a very high rate? Like, I don't know how else you can get this besides heavy overload in the weight room. It's like, this is what the goal should be for the most part.
Yeah. That's huge because so many coaches are still 90% are still stuck in that, like, let's just match the energy system of the court.
Nope, that was off season.
Yeah.
That's what we have an off season for.
I would say all of high school
that's why we have basketball.
Just got better.
Yeah.
Right. All of high school basketball.
So what are we not? Okay, in basketball, what are we not getting? We're not getting extremely high force. We're not getting. We do get. I personally, so most strength coaches would say we get enough plyometrics on the court. Mm-hmm. I agree to a certain extent, but we're getting very sub-maximal plyometrics. Think about when you're on the court, you're doing your 3-man weave or whatever, you finish with a layup, you're not getting as high as you can every day in practice. You're getting
all I ever did every time I played basketball in high school is jump as high as I possibly could every time during the 3-man drill. If I couldn't slap the backboard as hard as I possibly could and try to touch the rim with my other hand going up every single time. So you're totally wrong. What do you know about basketball? I played varsity small school basketball. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So if you were to go watch an NBA,
Dr. Galpin.
Yeah. If you were to go watch an NBA practice, you'd be like, oh my gosh, these guys do not try at all. Or like go watch before a game. Is like they're just messing around in layup lines and they're just not trying to exert themselves. Or like in skills training, they'll always ask you how many. So you're like, okay, do this. And they're like, well, how many? And it's because they want to pace themselves. They're like, if I'm doing 3, then I'll go all out. But if you want me to do 30, I'm only going to go at 40%.
Smart.
Yeah. So they're always trying to pace themselves. And so, you're getting plyometrics, but you're getting very, very low level plyometrics. And you're getting very imbalanced plyometrics because you want to go off your left leg and you're going to land on the same leg. If you're a 2-foot jumper, you're planning right, left, but you're not planning left, right. Right, you go to what you're good at and you stay away from what you're bad at. So in the weight room, especially at the NBA level where you can individualize it, you got to know, okay, is that guy not taking off on his right leg? Well, we should do some right leg
mechanical
plyometrics.
standpoint. Yeah, focus on the mechanical standpoint.
Yeah, well, that's it. You're not getting when you're on the court, you're using the explosion for an outcome, which is not the explosion per se. Mm-hmm. When you're in the weight room, you are. Right. And this is the fundamental difference. So, yeah, you might be kind of jumping high, but you're jumping high as a means to get the ball, the dunk, the block, to do the drill, whatever.
Yep.
You're not jumping for the sake of jumping as high as possible,
right? Which
is what we can get in the weight room. Mm-hmm. And, by the way, while we're doing that, we reinforce a maximal effort jump with our mechanics, our takeoff and our land mechanics. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, would be a decent argument for that type of training, even in season.
Yes.
Right, because we need to shore up those and keep those things tight. If you want to keep around for the entire 95 to 100 games you're going to play, if things go well or whatever that number is, that has to be pieced together at all times, because a little slight change in mechanics is going to be a problem with not only how high you jump, but the injury.
Yeah.
So that is I think, a reasonable piece. The other thing would be controlled movement. So stability is a thing. Now that's not intentionally going slow so much that we're actually now fostering slow movement, but showing tremendous control. So I'm thinking like eccentric lowering, right? So moving down so that you can show me you can control that landed movement, right? That could be from the upper body, lower body, all the way up and down. Showing me control with load is a big thing. Now, that's not a lot of our training, but it's a small piece.
Yeah, it's funny. I think the biggest difference is between my first vertical jump program and this vertical jump program. Like you said, with my first, it was like everything is fast. Everything is max intent. And now I'm like, some stuff, especially in that preparatory phase, we're going to go a little bit slower. And especially I've done some more studying on what the tendons respond best to.
Oh, definitely.
And the tendons do like slow movement. They like isometrics, eccentrics, and they like slow, controlled, heavy lifting. So that's something that I definitely realized probably just a couple of years ago, and I started implementing that a lot more into my program.
Yeah, you're more likely to probably keep your folks healthier.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Right. Yeah, that's the goal. All right, so basically to sum that up is we're doing exactly the opposite of what we should be doing in basketball. We should be doing the things that we're not getting on the court. And so it's okay to step in season and lift heavy, and it's okay to do some explosive stuff. It's even okay to jump, but we're going to keep it low rep. This isn't going to be stuff that completely crushes us. It's okay to step in and do a set of 2 deadlifts and get a max intent.
Oh, that's so much more productive for people like this. I mean, I can't speak for, I don't think I've worked for any NBA basketball players, very minimal stuff. But with the baseball players, because it's similar in terms of it's 162 games, right? Where MMA fighters is different because they have an 8-week camp and then fight and then they're out, right? But, so with baseball players, though, the problem is I got 162 games. How the hell do I lift heavy and not screw up my performance over the season? With the counter is if you go 162 games, which is going to translate into like a 6-month season, and you don't lift, what the hell's going to happen if not lifting after the end of the 6 months, right? Yep. So I imagine basketball's the same way. You're playing basically twice a week?
Yep.
Is that fair?
Two, three times. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you might have back-to-backs, right? Yep. 3 times a week, all right. So then the question is, well, that's great and all, but like when do I actually do the lift? So in the perspective of a Major League Baseball player, if he pitches on Monday, the next day, Tuesday, is going to be the big, heavy, hard lift. Like, that's when we get it in. Why? Because that's the furthest away from the next day he's going to pitch. So the day after a game is the day not to get incredibly recovered. That's a day to train really, really, really hard. That system works well. Then it's typically an off day or kind of a back off day, then another medium day, then a back off day, then they're back on the mount.
Yep.
From there. So I think that system or something like that could work really well with NBA or just any college basketball players where you're playing 2-3 games. High school, you're playing once a week, basically, right? That's a way to, that's your heavy lift day, the day off. Then the following day could be your explosive day, corrective movement, things like that. And I think that's a very reasonable system. Those sessions are small. The volume load is really, really small. Over the course of the season, it's not going to build up to really anything. And you don't have to do 3 sets of 10. In fact, that would be about the opposite that we would recommend here, right?
Right.
Let's get quality reps in. When the quality goes down, so the quality meaning your technique, of course, or the load has to go down, or the speed in which you're moving the load starts to go down, then we're done. Because we're not there to just work for the sake of working. We're there to execute something, which is develop more force.
Yep.
Or learn to develop more force, or speed or whatever the task is. A little bit of finisher with some volume if you want to get the pump in.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And that is a big thing. I mean, we are trying to maintain hypertrophy, so we're not saying like 3 sets of 10 is bad.
No,
we're just saying like that's not where you should live, and then stay away
not
from
for
the
a
heavy and
5-month
explosive
basketball
stuff.
season.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the length of basketball? It's got to be at least 5
It's like
months.
6 months.
Okay.
6 months. Yeah.
Boy, yeah. If you don't do any hypertrophy work, that's going to be a problem.
October to March. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a doozy. So
Yeah.
the way to integrate that would be the speed stuff first, the power stuff, then the strength stuff, the true strength stuff, and then do it at a finisher for hypertrophy range if you want. I would cut all the muscular endurance basically, unless there's a real small thing like shoulder. I'm losing stability when my shoulder girdle gets tired, so do some extra work there to really build endurance in the shoulder girdle if that's my problem, or the glute medius or Achilles, or whatever I happen to do. But get that stuff in first, do the pump stuff at the end, and then from a coaching perspective, this is something we did really well with the baseball players a long time ago, is that last piece, we would give autonomy to them. So we'd basically be like, okay, athlete choice in this one.
Yeah.
So we're doing
that a lot.
curls today or whatever. You pick whatever ones you want to do.
Yep.
Don't even care how much. I don't even care how many you do. How many reps? I don't care. Whatever you want to do.
Right.
This is not going to matter, right? The squats, the deadlifts, the trap bar stuff, the jump. That I said 3, not 4. Right. Like this is very specific. The other stuff, fuck, I don't care. Do 10, 12, 15. I don't really care. Do whatever you want.
Choose your battles.
Yeah.
Yep. I love it. And then another thing I like how you talked about you're more intense, like heavy lifting, that the day where you have another day to recover from. A lot of the trend in the NBA is guys are just lifting directly after the game, which I actually like, especially because for me, after a game, your adrenaline is up, and it's hard to cool down then anyways. So you might as well just go pop in the weight room, and then you actually optimize. You get more recovery time. So you hit your lift then, and then that next day maybe you have a light lift, and then the next day you have your game. So you actually buy yourself a little bit of extra time.
Oh yeah. Right. Especially if you're going almost back-to-backs or every other days, right?
Yeah. I guess it also depends on how tired you are after the game, because if you're extremely fatigued, then we can't go get a good strength session.
No.
So it really all depends on your playing time. And like in the NBA, if you don't play a certain amount of minutes, you have to go do conditioning. It's required for most teams.
Exactly.
For most teams, they make you do that.
I mean, even the Rockets, late in the season had that one game where the starters, they're having a blowout. They're up by 30, and the starters all took off. Weren't even on the bench. So
they just walked away and started
walked
lifting.
away. Yeah, they were in the back lifting with like 7 minutes left in the game still.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I guess from a fan perspective, but like realistically, that's smart.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's why people were freaking out about it. But I was like, I know exactly what they're doing, because James loves to do that. He does that in the preseason, and nobody cares. But because it was late in the season.
Yeah, sports media just made a huge story that it wasn't. You know what I mean? It should have been.
They probably think they're in the back, like drinking tequila.
Exactly. They should have been lauding their commitment.
Right
yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay.
It's just being smart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let me shift gears here, talking about on the genetic side of fast twitch, slow twitch. Have you ever done any studies on gender differences and also ethnic differences?
Oh, boy, you're gonna get me fired.
I have carryover questions.
Can you just ask me if I hate black people? It's just like, God.
This is just science. Yeah. Somebody from Sports Illustrated did get fired, right? I believe somebody wrote an article on this topic and got fired.
Well, in today's climate, walk.
I've been trying to avoid this thing.
Tread super lightly.
All right, let's do gender.
Yeah.
Or probably more appropriately, sex.
Yeah.
And then you'll really get me fired with race. Great. Not much. The female species, as I like to call it, just so I don't offend anybody, the female species is grossly underrepresented, and specifically female athletes in sports science. Just basically nothing. It's nations entirely in there. So we really don't know much about the female athlete. Having said that, we did just biopsy a whole bunch of females from our Olympic and world teams in Olympic weightlifting. And the traditional dogma would say, if you look across the general population, typically women are about 10% more in slow twitch fibers than men. Right, so men have 10 or so % more fast twitch fibers than women. And that's probably fairly true across the literature in the general population of untrained people. But when we look at trained females, there is no difference at all in the percentage of fast and slow twitch in the men and women. And we found that same thing to be true. In fact, what we found is it was actually pretty interesting, because we were able to get enough that were like Olympic level and world caliber, and we had enough that were also just like what we'll call national caliber. So hadn't made the Olympic team, hadn't made the world teams, anything like that, but maybe won a bunch of national titles or something like that. And we had men and women. And what was very clear is there was a huge difference in the amount of fast twitch fibers the international world Olympic caliber athletes had relative to the national caliber, and gender didn't matter. at all. And so to me, it was more of a reflection of talent and years of training, because the Olympic caliber folks had been training and competing for like 8 years roughly on average, and the nationals were like 4. And so I don't know if it was simply their level of training or they're just their talent level, but it wasn't sex. That's clearly the case. In fact, again, the highest level athletes, the females, had more fast twitch than even the men did.
Wow.
And so that was the first study to really ever look at the female athletes, particularly from the speed, strength sort of the side of the equation. So they in terms of that metric, there's no difference at all between those individuals.
Is there anything in terms of adaptability, like if you take an untrained female and an untrained male, that a female would adapt to be, muscle fibers changing?
We don't really have any training studies on females like that, but I cannot imagine the rate of change would be any different. If anything, it would potentially favor the females.
That's what I was curious based on.
But we don't have anything to. It's a really good question.
Yeah.
I mean, I could speculate a bunch of stuff based on the molecular stuff, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But we see them change in training studies pretty equally. We're actually running a trial right now, just starting one, so we'll know in 5 years or whatever.
Yeah.
It gets done.
So then, is it safe to say, okay, males are more explosive overall and stronger overall than females because of hypertrophy of those muscle fibers? It's like they have the same. And then more testosterone for the males leads to more hypertrophy in the fast twitch?
Well, okay, so there's a couple of things we got to clean up there. Number one, of course, men, as a blanket statement, are going to be stronger and larger, right? Because they typically have more muscle mass. When you equate for the individual cell, so in other words, if I take a muscle fiber out of a female and put it in a petri dish, and I take one out of a man and I equate them for size, they produce about the same amount of force, which tells you the fiber size is a real major contributor to the force production at the muscle level. What I don't know is, are there also differences in mechanics because of leverage, pennation angle, biomechanics, connective tissue? Is it a neural issue? Is it a combination of all those things? I can't answer. What I can say is from the muscle level, it's not that big of a difference for the type, but is it for the size? Potentially.
Okay.
In terms of the testosterone, though, if you look at the training studies in females, it looks like, and this is actually a good way to catch yourself if you're sleeping here, we don't have any evidence. In fact, I'll say it this way. Most of the evidence suggests the rate of increase in muscle, so the rate of hypertrophy, is actually about equal between men and women. Men don't add muscle mass any more so than women do when they train. And so, albeit men have more testosterone, this is actually what indicates and tells us, and we have very good evidence to support this now, that the testosterone surge post-exercise explains very little of hypertrophy.
Right.
It's not a very big deal. Now, if you take exogenous testosterone, it's a big freaking deal.
Yeah.
But the amount of testosterone you have versus another, that has very little role in actual muscle hypertrophy.
Interesting.
If any at all. Probably basically nothing.
Wow.
So it's just the difference is in magnitude, right? So if we both increase 10%, but you weigh 200 pounds and I weigh 110, your 10% was 20 pounds, mine was 11. Now we keep going on that train, and it looks to be like, wow, I can noticeably see the 40 pounds you put on, Paul. Like, wow, I noticed the 12 you put on. Right. So it's the physical size as a general rule that plays it more so than the rate of increase, which is why women will always be generally smaller and men will always be generally larger, but their ability to change from their starting point is the same. And I think that's a message of positivity. It's like, chicks, if you want to get jacked, you can too.
Right.
You're not genetically dispositioned to not be able to get jacked.
Yeah.
Do whatever you want. If you train like that, you'll get it too. Doesn't matter about your testosterone.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Now give me the good stuff. Ethnicity.
Oh, crap.
I wasn't going to forget about this one.
I was like, where you at, dog? I thought you were going to rap. Say, no, we're done. Tape's out. That's it. I relied on you two both. All right. Okay. So I have actually looked into this extensively in the last year. The classic dogma would be, darker skinned, African American, black, any of these sort of combinations, because that's complicated in itself, are going to be more fast twitch, right? This is a trick of numbers for the most part. So if you look at classic bell curve stuff, so it's not that, say, people from Africa are faster. It's just that a stronger percentage of them, the variance is large. So in other words, some of them are tremendously terrible, but some of them, because of that, are unbelievably good. And the ones that are good but the averages really are not that different.
Don't they say in Africa it's the most diverse? Like you'll have one country where it's the tallest in the world, and then the next country over it's the shortest in the world.
Or you go in the Kenyans and then they have the best fitness in the world, but then you go to the Congo and they're the highest jumpers, which is the exact opposite, right? Or something like that. So I don't know if it's true, but I think you're.
It's bro science, but I think it's real science.
Okay, so now I'm dicing around things that are not really my area. Here is my area. If you look at the literature, it is pretty clear, and I'm going to use the term African American because that's what the literature used in the 70s and 80s. That's the best we could do it. As a side note, this is really, really complicated because just because you're black, that doesn't mean you're African of descent, and there's no differentiation in the still kind of racist era of the 70s, where it's just like, you're not white, so you're black. Okay, so take all these studies with a touch of a grain of salt there. Haitian accent versus we just talked about West African black, East African black, Southern African, what the hell are we talking? These are all different people. General public, it looks like for sure they have more fast twitch fibers. And this is one of the reasons why the black community or African American community is at extreme risk of diabetes.
Oh.
Type 2 diabetes.
Because it's carb dependent, right?
For sure, right? Your fast twitch muscle fibers are the ones that handle glucose the best. So if you have an excessive amount of those, this is what's going to have the direct relationship with processing.
That's
glucose.
Interesting. That makes sense.
And this is well known, right? And this is why this community receives a lot of research support for type 2 diabetes treatment and management. And this is why obesity is higher in those individuals as well. If you look at, though, a trained person, we don't really have any evidence to support that translates across. So I can't tell you right now, like, oh, okay, did you see more black players in the NBA because they have more fast twitch fibers genetically? I don't know if that's true or not, because it gets really complicated. In other words, you could get like your DNA tested, right? And you could get one of these commercially available kits and they could tell you your ancestry. But that's all arbitrary too.
That's what I was curious about.
It's 100% arbitrary. In other words, like, what's your ethnic background? Where's your?
Just everywhere.
You're a mutt.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
I'm a mutt too.
Yeah. Okay, so like, what's the biggest percentage?
I'm told Italian.
Told Italian. Okay.
Think German.
German. All right. So you're German. Let's say you're 50%, and then the rest is mutt, and you're 50% German. Rest is mutt. Well, what even makes up a German? Well, I don't know, because prior to being German, it was Mongolian. That same exact area, and prior to that, it was something else. Well, so like, where do we draw the line on like, no, your DNA is from West Africa? No, like these people were different over the course of time. So I don't know what that actually means to be black. Black is a thing that we can use to, but I don't know where your genetics. Like the genetics are not one thing; they have evolved over time. So I can't tell you anything. So because of that, I can't run a study and say like I want to look at white people versus black people because I don't even know what black people means.
Yeah. So
there is no one black people thing.
Right. Yeah. I have a question because at the very beginning of the podcast, you talked about just our adaptability as humans. That from a molecular level, we have the most out of any other species that you look at. Ability to change. Is there, as we're talking about ethnically in terms of as you go down from a hereditary standpoint, just what you do from generation that you're passing on, like in terms of, you know what I mean? And then you could look at those geographical areas and be like, okay, they were more having to adapt to this for this means of survival. And therefore their muscle fibers changed. And then in terms of what gets passed on to your offspring, and then how does that all...
I don't know much about anthropology like that, but that's really would be...
Neither do I.
That's the good question. I don't know. You kind of hinted on an idea called epigenetics, which is, you sort of got around it, but we actually just finished a trial on that. Was just recently published, but this is the idea that you have your certain genes, right? This is the genome you inherit from your parents, and you can't change that with anything unless you go and gene edit, which is totally possible now.
Yeah,
and this is wild.
That's scary.
They're doing it. Yeah.
So I could eventually have Zion's genes, maybe, if we figure it out.
Definitely.
Can we do that?
No. But we could give you,
someday.
We could give you gene therapy right now and change your fiber type composition, almost surely.
Wow.
We could give you gene therapy right now and make it more likely for you to be taller.
Oh, let's do it.
Add more muscle. We could basically do whatever you want to do. And we could certainly do it in the embryo.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we can engineer the kid real easy.
Wow.
That's not complicated.
A Chinese geneticist just get in trouble for doing that exact same thing?
Did it? Don't know if the in trouble part's true, but he definitely did it.
Yeah.
Without consent.
Yeah, with the embryo. Made it resistant to HIV?
Yep.
Is that what it was? Yeah.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That's their, we're definitely right. And it's not even that expensive. Yeah. Not even that expensive at all.
So where were you going with the epigenetics?
Yeah, okay. So you can't change outside of gene editing, you can't change your genes, but how your genes are expressed. So in order for anything to happen in your body, your DNA, right, your genes, code for protein. So in other words, you want to gain more muscle in your bicep. Well, some gene that makes that protein in your bicep has to turn on and say, okay, replicate this gene, make more of that protein. So that turning on or off of the genes is called epigenetics, and we know that that is changed through lifestyle. So while you can't change the genome per se, except for long, long periods of time of evolution, the epigenetic factor, which is, well, based on my parents did this, what you inherit is then different. And so we look at things like, if you were obese when you had your children, it's not that you can change the genes they inherit, but which ones are on or off are potentially influenced by the behavior of your children or of your parents and probably your grandparents.
Wow.
So the things they went through as children are probably still being trickled down into you. So I'm not saying that if you train really, really hard, you'll have super babies.
Yeah.
You'll get that.
Paul
but there
told me
is
that like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I'm concerned because
it's not going to hurt your chances.
Yeah.
Put it that way. It's only going to possibly help.
So would my son that's 15 months old right now, if I was in great shape in 2017, have a genetic advantage as opposed to my child that's going to be born in a month from now because I was in lackluster shape in 2018?
You fucked him.
Yeah.
You really fucked him.
That's interesting. So I can have a case study
Yeah,
with
can
my
you
two
bleep
kids.
that out? Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, you hosed him, buddy.
So theoretically, my first son should be far more elite than my second.
Yeah, and just shame on you.
Shame.
I hope you
feel bad
replay
now.
this podcast for him.
I genuinely feel bad.
When he gets cut from his middle school basketball team,
Yeah.
And his big
and you're in
brother
there
just-
His
yelling at
brother's
his,
in the
he
NBA.
could never catch
yelling
his
at his
brother.
coach, trying to get it back on the team, and
That's
you go, "Thanks, Dad.
interesting. Yeah.
Thanks for being a fat turd when I was."
That's interesting.
No, probably not.
Okay.
There's too many factors that go into that. He's probably just fine. But it's more things like smoking, extreme sedentary behavior, highly processed foods, low quality nutrition, stuff like that. And we are still figuring this epigenetics thing out. A lot that we're pretty confident on, and then all of a sudden we're like, no, that doesn't happen at all. Actually, shit, throw that all out. So there's a lot to go there, but it's very, very clear that turning on and off, and this is why like a test you could get for $200 would never tell you your fiber type profile, right? Because it doesn't know what proteins were actually expressed. It just tells you the genes you have, which doesn't tell you anything, right? Because what you do determines how they're expressed, which determines what you actually have in your body.
Right.
So that's not going to give you a tremendous amount of insight. But going back to the sort of ethnicity question then, it's an interesting area. I've thought about this. Actually, my interview at Cal State Fullerton, this came up because our chair was a sociologist. And I was like, I'd love to do it. And back then I wasn't scared to do it and lose my job. Now I'm definitely not doing it for any amount of money. Because what am I going to say? If it comes out that black people have more fast twitch fibers,
You're going to have a lot of haters.
if I come out and say the opposite, what happens? Even more haters.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, white people are genetically superior to black people. Fantastic. Good, Andy. Just cut that and clip that. Just put that part on YouTube. That's a wrap.
Headlines of the podcast. Yeah.
Right? So, there's just no win.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to... There's no win to learn
But
that.
There's people like me that need that because I get asked this every single day,
It's
and then
true.
I could just be like, Dr. Galpin told me that this.
It's just because they have longer Achilles. That's why.
That might not be a joke. That's anecdotally I've noticed, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the hard part, like I said, with all this really is, like, what is black?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, geez, if you're... Who knows, right? So... That's why I think none of these things will ever be answered. I think the better way is to look at it regionally. So people from West African descent, people from Scandinavian, kind of like 10,000 years ago Scandinavian, or Western Germans from 10,000. Like, this is more appropriate than using terms like black, white, Latino. I mean, geez, Latino is just like everything not white and black, right?
Yeah.
Or Chinese.
Yeah.
Well, or Asian. Fantastic, right? That's still just a ton of variation between the people that lived in the Andes and the people that lived in Honduras and the people that live in Venezuela. These are going to be wildly different people.
Yeah. So would it be easier to theorize it just because you're talking about you just expressing that because of the lifestyle that they're all in the city, that they're all having to express the same thing. So then all the likeness just gets, because of the environment that you're in.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think that would, if you looked at, again, the easy examples of marathon runners, it's like, okay, they live at 8,000 feet or whatever the hell they live at. And then they all look at this, and you go there and you visit the cities, and you see that they're all running 7 miles a day to school and back, and by the time they're 5 years old or whatever, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
okay. Like, it wasn't the fact that you have a little more soldier fibers. This is what is changing your lifestyle. And then you go to the Congo or whatever other place, and you're like, I see.
Yep.
This is what's doing it. So that'll probably tell you more than
So
anything.
let's summarize that as
God, this got hot.
We don't quite know.
No.
We can't make any definitive decisions, but we can change muscle fiber types either way. So even if the cards are stacked against you, you might still be good to go. Train hard, see what happens.
Change your environment.
You certainly have. I want to make sure I clarify this point. Your genetics do matter.
Yeah.
Clearly, that tells you your starting place, right? And so if you get the Zion cards, you're gonna start. It doesn't matter what he does training right now. He's gonna be better than me. Period. Like, doesn't matter. He's just way higher. But our ability to change is equal, right? So from my starting point, his starting point, those are different. But how much we can go in within each other is the exact same. So yeah, you can always get better. It just comes down to consistency and patience.
Right.
Right. Are you doing the right thing? Are you being consistent? And are you giving it enough time to give it a realistic adaptation? If you look at something like muscle fibers, like we really need to talk about a year. Like this is really, I mean, you'll start picking it up at 8 to 12 weeks, but really give the body a year. I mean, I don't even know how long your programs are that you have, but
a year.
Are they?
Yeah.
There you go. Oh,
That's good promo for my program.
Exactly.
I really want a discount code now for this. No, but like these are realistic time frames, especially if we're thinking about kids that are 15, 16. Man, like you're changing so much as it is. Like you just be a little bit patient, move well, keep at it, and give it some time, and you'll change a lot of. I mean, I could give you tons of examples of people who
where do you think the
8-inch vertical jumps and then have 20 inches.
Yeah. Where do you think the apex would be for like somebody like Paul, who's been, he's been doing jump training for 10 years now and has consistently tried to, revolutionize it? Is he going to hit an apex where he cannot go and then all of a sudden?
Yeah, I mean, we all have a physiological limit, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to come down to the things that can't be changed, like the length of your foot,
Mm-hmm.
right? The shank length, how much body mass you carry. And there's things you can manipulate that. You're going to hit a point.
Then we go to gene typing.
Yeah, until we get that going. And then at some point, by the time you about figured out, you start getting too old.
Yeah, right. That's the issue. Once you figure it out, it's like, well,
it's like start trashing back down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a limit to all of us, but probably the vast majority don't ever get there.
Yeah,
It's interesting.
and also, I mean, even the guys, like when we're in our prime, maybe we're highly trained, but none of us have done 100% the right stuff. Like
No.
we've been doing the wrong shit forever. Like I grew up doing the jump soles and I grew up on Air Alert, like terrible programs.
You don't like the jump soles?
They're making a comeback.
Are they?
They're making a comeback because in strength and conditioning, elevated heels, people are calling it floating heels. I call it elevating heels. Basically, like you got a bumper plate, you put the ball of your foot on and your heel hanging off, and you might do a single leg squat or whatever to improve that stiffness in the ankle.
Man,
and then you think back and you're like, that's actually what the jump soles did.
How old are you guys?
29.
Okay, so we're closer in age. You remember back in the day though with the jump sole, like you get the East Bay, and there'd be like the advertisements in there for those damn things.
Oh,
and
yeah,
like when you buy those things, like mail order, and you wait 6 weeks for it to come back or whatever. And you're like, hell yeah! And then your one friend gets it, and you're like, oh shit, he's gonna be tunking next year.
Yeah.
Like no,
Just
never
never
touching the
dunked.
net. Like just touching the net.
I would walk around school in them,
That's
everything. I lived my whole life in them. I never saw a significant improvement.
Yeah. I remember the drills with them too. It was just like stand up. Yep. Constant jumps onto the rim.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not like it's completely off base, but probably not the system that we thought we were buying.
No, not at all. So let's finish off with a quick speed round, and this might be all over the place. This might not be exactly about fiber types. So speed round, and every time we do this, it ends up not being a speed round, but we'll try.
I don't know if you notice I talk a lot, though, so good luck with the speed round.
Right.
I have off-topic fun questions for you, though.
Oh, bring it, man.
All right, so first question of the speed round. Is there a 30-minute post-workout window? Do we have to get our protein before we're done sweating?
Oh, my God. That's not a fast question at all. Or not a fast answer. Okay, so yes, there is. The question is, do you care? So it's very clear that within sort of 60 to 180 minutes post-exercise, you are more sensitive to carbohydrate and protein. Whether you care depends on context. So in other words, the two things we're pretty much concerned with are maximizing muscle protein synthesis, which is hypertrophy, or restoring muscle glycogen, which is recovery, right? So energy production. Those answers are slightly different depending on which one of those two you're after, and it's different for protein versus carbohydrate. So protein ingestion looks like the window is about 24 hours, And so it can actually, you have some time there. And as long as the total amount of protein in a 24-hour period is the same, it doesn't really matter timing-wise. Carbohydrate is different. You probably do want to get that in pretty close if you're trying to maximize muscle glycogen recovery within an hour or so. Now, we have some data just coming out. I haven't released it at all yet, but it looks like that window is actually different potentially for women versus men. So it looks like the women are a bit more sensitive to that. And so we may have slightly different windows between the genders. We got to do some more stuff in the lab to tease that out a bit more. The other piece that's complicated is it depends on the state that your body is in when you train. So for example, if you train at 9 o'clock in the morning fasted, well then getting those nutrients in really close to post-workout is really important because now you don't have anything in the system. You're working out at 5 o'clock after 3 full meals throughout the day, then it doesn't matter at all if you wait 3 or 4 hours, probably. And so it really depends on context. I do this a lot with, I'll play with it. So for example, you worked out on Friday afternoon. Okay, but you're going to then get on a plane Friday night, you're going to do media all day Saturday, and Sunday's recovery day. Well, I'm not worried about getting your carbs and protein in because you got 4 days until you're going to train again. By the time you come back, you're going to be fully recovered. No issue. That's different than if you're training at 5 a.m. fasted, or if you're training at even in the afternoon, but you've already trained once in the morning, or you're training again the next morning, things like that. And so how quickly you need the recovery should determine what you do with your nutritionist. There's not one blanket answer I could give with you. So is that window real? Yes. Do you care about it? No, that depends on context.
Yeah. So if you're a coach and you're in that preseason again, you're doing weights and practice, and so you got your weights and you're going, let's say you're working out 12 to 1, and then you have practice from 4 to 7.
Yeah. So my comment to that would be, is the window incredibly important? Maybe not, but why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not maximize it?
What's the hard? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like as long as you're not going over caloric for the entire day and leading to extra body mass that you don't want, why not maximize the potential for recovery? It has no downside to getting it in right then, and has potential upside. So while the window isn't as big a deal as we used to think it is, the what to do is still the same. It has a neutral effect, potentially beneficial. Why change the recommendation then?
Yeah.
So I would still say get in your protein and carbohydrate specifically with very low fat post these exercise routes. So use the fat throughout the rest of the day, but 10% at most of fat, the rest protein, carbs.
Okay.
And depending on what kind of workout you do, you can ratchet the carbs up and down. Right? So bigger workout, longer, more work done, higher carbs and more carbs. Like a strength workout, like some of the stuff we're talking about, plyometrics maybe, and some pure strength, very little in fatigue. Like a 1-to-1 strength protein to carbohydrate ratio is fine, right? And so about 0.4 grams per kilogram body weight would be just about fine. So if you're, 150 pounds, 30 grams of protein, 30 grams of carbs.
Right.
You're going to be just fine. Scale that up and down based on your body mass. You did more endurance, maybe go 2-to-1. So maybe go 50, 60 grams carbs, 30 grams protein. You had a hell of a session, you're out there 2.5 hours, and then maybe go up to 3-4-to-1. So you can kind of scale it up and down based on the recovery needs.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. If you had 3 supplements to recommend, now I know the real answer is just get it through.
Okay. I'll give you your answer.
Get it through food, right?
Yeah.
But then we work with real life people, and it's like they're not going to get everything through food. So what would you recommend?
Do you count like protein powder as a supplement?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a pretty good slam
one.
dunk. If you don't meet your, if you're not at your protein needs.
Yeah.
Creatine has about the most efficacy you can imagine.
Yeah.
The most evidence.
And I've seen you talk about brain improvements. And
yeah, I mean, geez, we sort of gave up on the creatine for sport performance like 15 years ago because it was so clear.
Yeah.
And it was just like, well, why study this anymore? The vast majority of the research now is looking at cognitive function, decision making, brain function, performance, and that's because the brain it really likes to be powered by creatine. So the things that actually power the brain is called astrocytes. They function tremendously well on creatine. It's a very quick, and it's called stoichiometry. The chemistry of it is really efficient and effective. So it loves creatine. So really, really helpful for even things like neurological disorders, brain dysfunction over time. A lot of research. There's more research in brain function with creatine than there is sport performance.
Wow.
By far, not even close. Dementia, muscle preservation, aging, sarcopenia, all that stuff. That's where the research is
with
going.
where we're at in the science, do you think it still needs to be cycled, or is this just something you can take year round?
No, yeah, there's no, like, it's not like a hormone or anything like that where you need to cycle it. Now, I don't recommend anyone take any supplement year round, but there's really you don't build up a tolerance to it like caffeine or anything like that. You can pretty much go whatever you want. You don't need to load if you don't want, but you can. There's really no harm. So the creatine's money because it's super cheap. It typically is very safe. There's really low of any of the supplements, even like vitamins. There's a less chance of something going wrong with creatine than anything else. And it has strong efficacy and effectiveness. The likelihood of improvement's high, and the magnitude of improvement's pretty high. It's the one where I'm like, man, this is about the biggest slam dunk we could probably pick.
Yeah.
So that would be number 2. Then number 3...
It makes me crave creatine.
Yeah.
I always finish that by telling people, like, I don't actually have stock in any creatine companies or anything. Like, it sounds like I...
Go on with love.
Like I do. And then number 3, kind of depending on the context of the person, this could be anything from beta-alanine, which is fairly effective.
And that's going to improve endurance, or?
Yeah, like anaerobic endurance.
Yeah.
So acid buildup. Think of it that way. It buffers intracellular acid, which is really...
That's nice.
It'd be really effective for basketball players or soccer players.
Sit down in that stance a little longer.
Yeah. I mean, it's the defensive possession to get you through. It's there. That one's pretty good. And depending on what's going on, vitamin D is probably a bit overrated, as well as fish oil. But again, both of those are very little harm and potential upside.
Yeah.
So neither one of those are problematic. So that's like 4 or 5 or what? We just 3. Sorry.
There we go.
But the one, let me finish on this though. It's really important, depending on if you're in the NCAA or anything else. Even if you're just a high school kid and you don't have to be subjected to USADA or WADA testing, you still need to buy your supplements from somewhere that is third-party tested and certified.
Yeah.
It's critically important.
Yeah. Does that third party matter, or is it just any third party?
Well, Informed Choice, or NSF for sport, anything like that are fine. But there's a lot. The UFC just signed a deal with, I think, Informed Choice and some other places. But USADA and WADA have these lists on their websites. There's loads of resources. Just make sure they have some third-party certification.
Yeah.
For 1,000 reasons. I could give you horror story after horror story of people getting SARMs and multivitamins. And coming in caffeine, even caffeine pills have been tainted now. UFC fighter just got awarded $27 million yesterday because of a tainted supplement, and a company sued the company and won $27 million.
Wow.
Was that the mainstream?
The what?
Was that the mainstream one? I'm a novice, or John Bones Jones. I know he got in trouble, but it was interesting because when he got in trouble for alternative reasons, and then I saw him get that sponsorship by GAT, and he got really into powerlifting, and then all of a sudden he came back and he got tested, and I was just like, wow.
There's John's on a different planet than the rest of these dudes, but I can't remember the name of the company that this was. You could Google it real fast, but Romero, that was it. It's loads. It's a real problem right now. We're getting SARMs left and right popping up, and a bunch of tainted supplements. It's getting really gnarly. So even if you're a kid, like it said in high school, you don't want that stuff.
No.
Like, you don't want that stuff anywhere near you. And the way that they can save blood and saliva and stuff and test it 10 years down the road, man, it's just not worth it. So really be careful with the supplement game.
You got any speed round questions?
Well, I got a couple, thoughts on a vegan diet, because the popularity of that right now as well.
That is so not fast.
No.
That's the longest.
It could be fast.
Well, I mean, geez, I'm not fast with any of these things. There's a difference between can and should. Can you succeed? Sure. And people are different. It takes a lot of work. You have to be really conscious of what you're doing. And there are specific problems for an athlete that would come with a vegan or vegetarian diet. Examples: creatine. Where are you going to get that from? That's potentially problematic. B12. Some other issues. That doesn't mean it can't be done. There's plenty of athletes that are fine, but that doesn't mean they couldn't be doing better. I have worked with a vegan athlete before. It was very, very difficult. Protein intake was probably about a quarter of what it should have been, and this was really, really problematic and basically cost her a career. So I'm not saying if you go vegan, you're going to lose your career or anything like that. It can be done, and there's plenty of people that know that space really, really well, but it can't be something that is just flippant and just sort of thrown out there. That's potentially going to have some problems. So I'll dance around that question like that.
Yeah. No, we talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
So Skylar is vegan, and so we've had this argument over and over again. I tried to go vegan because he actually convinced me a little bit in year 1, and I went vegan, and then I was like, well, if I'm going to get 0.85 or up to 1 gram per pound of body weight on the vegan diet, that's very, very tough, especially with me, how busy I am. I found I was eating all day, and I was still falling short. And this is me trying to stay away from supplements and just get it through food. Yeah. I just couldn't do it. That's the one thing that knocked me off the vegan diet.
Yeah, and it depends on the training goal too. Like, what are you going after?
Yeah.
The leucine content is particularly problematic for the plant-based proteins, and just the evidence. You look at the evidence with soy, in particular, it's just not as effective as whey.
Oh yeah, the absorption rates are.
Yeah, super low bioavailability is tough, with the leucine content being particularly difficult. Having said that, black beans are solid.
Yeah. That's
there's lots of decent. You just have to. You just can't be. But honestly, the same thing is like you can't be a dipshit with your nutrition if you're not vegan either.
Exactly. So I think that was the biggest benefit.
But it's easier to be a dipshit not on the vegan diet.
Well, it's just because
still get by.
Yes.
Well, maybe. Yeah. I mean, like you just want to avoid the vegans who are like, oh, what'd you eat today? Pop-Tarts.
Yeah. Exactly.
But the vegan ones, well, like, fantastic. Yeah. Right. So either one, if you're eating Pop-Tarts, the vegan ones, or Pop-Tarts, the non-vegan ones, you're still eating like a dipshit.
Exactly.
So I don't really care what you're doing. Yeah. I'm sure you could be fine. I mean, the question for longevity, the question of living your life is different than a professional athlete. So I think a professional athlete, and there's loads of them that seem to be doing fine. You just better really be paying attention to a few things. So I don't think it's the easier route. I think it's the more difficult route, but that doesn't mean it's not a route you can't do.
Yeah. No, that's one thing we talked about too. Is just in terms of it enhanced my conscientious approach towards food in general when I did it, because I knew that I was going to have to, be far more educated on what I'm eating and why and what I'm missing.
Do you feel like the quality of your nutrition overall went up?
Initially, yes. Yeah. Initially, drastically, yes, and that's why I stayed to it. But I actually was doing it for far more separate reasons. I mean, it was really a monetary reason at first, but then that was some of the benefits in terms of recovery. Tendonitis, patellar tendonitis, things like that, like drastically dissipated. Where I was like, oh wow, I can bounce back a lot quicker.
So I'm really glad you said that, because this is a very common thing. We see that people make giant leaps to paleo diet or to keto or to pick your thing, right? The two things we have to clarify are: was it the diet or was it the removal?
Exactly.
Of the previous. So did the tendon issues go away because you stopped eating the really low quality food and exchanged that for a bunch of fruits and vegetables and seeds and nuts?
Yep. Exactly.
Or was it the fact that you weren't eating meat anymore? Well, I'm going to go ahead and put most of my eggs in one basket, which is the super high quality, right? And the evidence would support me on that one. Having said that, awesome. Like, I'm not going to bitch about somebody eating more fruits and vegetables.
Exactly. That's where
this is a win all day. Like,
and
I'm not complaining about that.
That was the 2 year growth period too, in terms of like if I'm giving an athlete and I'm sitting there and I'm talking about strictly performance, I'm like, tell them to go vegan? Probably not, because of the, the amount of psychological strain that'll put on them. Yeah. But yeah, so definitely cool.
Okay, last one. Or do you have a good one?
I have a fun one.
Okay,
fantastic. Because this is the worst speed round I've ever seen. Yeah, 2 questions.
Okay, so
usually these are like 10.
You got 5 seconds to answer this one. Okay, past, current, any MMA fighter, fight to the no holds barred. Who are you picking? Who's representing you in a fight?
So if I got to pick one fighter
it can't just be one of your guys.
Not going to lose.
Don't do what I do and just rep your guys.
James Harden. God, I would have to go. This is a tough one. My brain is only picking up one name right now, and so I think I'll have to go with that. Probably Vanderlei Silva.
Okay.
Who is his nickname is the Axe Murderer.
Yeah, it's a good nickname.
I'm
scared.
Is apropos. It's very apropos. So just a solid. I would say technique is not the word you would think of when you think of Vanderlei Silva. You think of more of like bite down in your mouthpiece, tuck your chin, close your eyes, and just start swinging wildly. But he's one of the best of all time. He's just absolutely insane. So yeah, how you ever pick against a guy like that?
Yeah.
Or Brock Lesnar, one of the two.
Hardest sport to train for? I know your answer because we talked about this off air.
I don't know my honest answer. I would say, you mean like more complicated or more physically demanding?
Yeah, as far as on the strength coach, like the realm of what you got to balance, endurance, power, and
Yeah, I would say.
Go top 3.
Yeah, you know, the combat sports are so difficult, but of course I'm clearly biased towards all of those. I think boxing is probably the easiest of the combat sports.
Mm-hmm.
Wrestling's really difficult just because like the physical demands of wrestling are probably harder than any other sport.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not insanely complicated to program for that. The mixed modality sports like MMA is really, really challenging.
Yeah.
Because unlike any other sport, the game can be over at a different time. Like, you know, in NBA, like, you know for sure you're going to play 48. It might be 48 seconds. That's it. So if you're not prepared to be that level of strength and power, it's a wrap.
Right.
You don't get to play anymore. There's no third quarter. There's no second. You didn't get to finish the first.
Yeah.
You're out. But by the same token, if you get drowned in 25 minutes in, it's hard. So the skill demands are really, really hard. I would listen to other arguments, though. I'm not.
Yeah. No, I would actually agree. I mean, I've always said basketball is one of the toughest, but I agree. I would say MMA is a lot tougher. We don't have to make weight class, so you have that stress.
Yeah,
like you got to cut and figure out how to maintain high performance while in these crazy weight.
How would you restructure that if you were given like if
I like what the ONE FC does in Asia. So there's hydration testing. So you weigh in at 155, but you also have to take a hydration test.
Oh, that's smart.
And so when people leave the UFC and go over there, they end up going up 1 or 2 weight classes, which is stupid because they fight the same people.
Yeah.
Like, now we're all just not dehydrating. But I mean, it's insane the weight cut that we'll have to go through. I mean, geez, one athlete, the last one, I'm just going literally in backwards order here. Went from 190 to 155 in 4 weeks. Went from 180 to 155 in 24 hours.
That's insane.
Going back, like, another 192 to 155 in 6 weeks or so, and that's going to be 175 to 155 in 20 or so hours. Like, these are pretty standard numbers. The biggest I've ever been a part of, 252 to 185 in 8 weeks.
And maintain performance.
Oh, you have to improve it, develop skill, learn wrestling, and then fight another trained killer in your underwear in front of a million people.
Yeah.
That's real stress on the strength coach right there.
That's just harder than basketball.
Yeah.
Straight up. That's some more
right.
difficult.
Well, we have a buffer period. Like, we want them to be in peak shape for training camp, but if they're not, they still get training camp, and then they still get their preseason. And if you're not in great shape for your first 5 games, you can work your way into shape. And
you can come out of the game.
Yeah.
Time out for a second.
Yeah.
Like, you can literally call a timeout, or you can tap the head, like, give me the sub on out. The other thing makes it really difficult about the combat sports is there's no guaranteed games.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get guaranteed. You might fight once a year. And so if you go in there and you're not all these things ready to go, and you slip and you dick the wrong way, you dodge the wrong way, and it's a wrap, you might not get to play again for a year.
Yeah.
Every other sport, you're guaranteed. You know exactly when the games are, basically. Like, it's on the schedule. It's set. Baseball, like all the big fours, you know when it is. They don't know when they get to fight, and they might get called and be like, you want to fight this year? You got to do it in 2 weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And that's your livelihood. So you might fight for $30,000, and if you fight 3 times, hey, not a bad year. You fight once, that's a bad year.
Yeah.
And then, oh yeah, by the way, you tore your ACL, and you go. It's hard. Yeah. It's really, really tough.
So I think we officially worked it out. MMA is the hardest to train for. This is now well established.
There's probably some other sports
pose any other arguments,
but like weightlifting's super easy.
Yeah, you
basically
have one goal.
The program is complicated, but
but you don't have to balance endurance demands, and you don't have contact injuries. That's nice. Football, you got to deal with a ton of contact injuries, but you don't have to train as much on the endurance side.
No, depending on your position too, it could be a fairly low. And they know exactly when it's coming. It's just so much planning going on. That one is not particularly. These are hard to execute. That's not what we're saying. We're just like
the sport itself, but
right.
The programming is not particularly complicated. I mean, I think baseball is my favorite, of course.
Yeah,
it's just like whatever.
Yeah, you could be totally out of shape.
It doesn't matter at all. It's like pull your hamstring jogging to first. The guy's out 4 to 6 in the deal.
Yeah, no, the argument that I've always made is just with jumping athletes, it's so difficult because we get so many injuries from jumping. And if you look at the injuries happening with the eccentric. So we have so much more landing, and we're landing from 40 inches with contact in the air. It's one thing to be a volleyball player and land from 40 inches, but we're actually getting pushed in the air.
Yeah. That's actually the story of my UFC career too. Is I was playing in a pickup game in my senior year of high school, and I went up for a fast break dunk, and somebody just pushed me full out from behind, and I had that brief moment of adrenaline where I turned around, I threw the ball at him, and I realized I was throwing the ball about somebody 5 inches taller and 100 pounds heavier. So no matter how mad I was like,
And you could have done it. 6 weeks. Come with 6 weeks.
Yeah,
6 week count.
You're gonna get me up.
Train with Doctor, good to go.
Problem.
There we go.
That's some dudes like that.
Go back to that guy like 15 years later. I'm ready now.
Yeah, exactly.
Jack some dude up. He's fat and bald. And he's got his 4 kids. And just nail him.
Oh man. All right. Well, I would love to keep going, but you got to go save the world through science. So we're gonna not be selfish, and we're gonna let you go. Where can people find you? Because I know that I'm gonna get bombarded in my inbox and in my DMs. Where can people find you? Where can they learn more from you?
Probably the easiest place to follow along is Instagram. If you want, most of my stuff is fairly sciencey based. I try to put out what we do on there. But if you want the direct links, that's probably easier on Twitter because you can't sort of direct link things on there. So I'll throw up a lot of studies and try to give a decent interpretation of what that means on those things. So those are up there, and then you can go to my website, just my name, andygalpin.com. You guys talked about some of the videos, but basically I try to take and make it so that everyone can have the college education in my classroom. So I'm trying to get all of the goal is to get all of my lectures from all my classes up on that YouTube page and toss them out for free. And there's nothing to sign up for. There's no payment or anything. It's all straight up free. So you can go watch those on YouTube or the website or whatever you want to do. So
I love it. Cool. Well, I appreciate it, Dr. Galpin. Thank you guys for listening to episode 4. Be sure that to check out pjfperformance.net if you're interested in signing up for any of the Vert Code programs. Off season is gain season. So now is our time to improve those fast twitch muscle fibers, just like Dr. Andy Galpin was talking about. Until next time, peace.